First thing we are doing is we're filing a petition for a writ of certiorari, and that's the justices decide whether this is a case that they're going to review this term. 4 votes are necessary to take the case up for consideration.
And what would this mean for you, Alan Leverett, as we begin to wrap up? I mean, you've been living with this case now for several years. What kind of response have you gotten in Little Rock and around your beloved state of Arkansas?
Julia pointed out, most people are still unaware that this is the law because it was passed through without any fanfare, without any real news coverage. And so most people, when I tell them or they ask me about it, and I explain it to them, they just kind of look at me blankly and they say, what does that have to do with Arkansas? And it has nothing to do with Arkansas. It has everything to do with culture wars that are being waged in this country, particularly by the Republican legislatures, particularly ours.
With us, Alan Leverett, publisher of the Arkansas Times and heirloom tomato farmer, Brian House, ACLU senior staff attorney, and Julia Bacha, director of the film Boycott. She also made the film Naila and the Uprising, which just premiered at the Hare Film Festival at the Algerian refugee camps of the Sahrawis. That does it for our show. Happy belated birthday to Robbie Karen. I'm Amy Goodman. Stay safe.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of 91.3 FM WBNY, the United Students Government of Buffalo State, or Buffalo State itself. Due to the opinionated nature of these programs, listener discretion is highly advised. If you have any questions or comments about today's program, you can give us a call at 716-878-5104.
To join Mr. Hare on today's Living for the People, dial 878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. Or go to facebook.com/91.3 WBNY and comment there. That's facebook.com/91.3 WBNY.
I don't think we can assume that just because race is...
All right, here we go. This is L. Nathan here. Welcome you to our broadcast, focused on providing insight into events shaping our national and regional world, and examining the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following the Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And of course, our program is live, so you can call in, you can join our discussion. We really hope that you will. Our number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. And of course, you all know I brag about this all the time, that I've been admitted into the 21st century. I have a green card. I don't have citizenship.
You got a green card. Wow.
But I got a green card. Trying to get a J9. I don't even know what a J9 is. but I have one. Right? And so to allow me to be able to function with citizen rights in the 21st century, we had to have somebody that knows something about the IT world. And so we have with us Willie H., who does the live streaming of our program. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan here. You guys can call us up at 716-878-5104. And I welcome our Facebook viewers, our Twitter viewers, our LinkedIn viewers, our YouTube viewers. Comment and ask questions. Mr.
And
Hare.
if you're listening live, you can call or you can type in your questions, your concerns, or your observations. We'll respond to as many as we can while we're on the air. So don't let aversion to people seeing your face be the reason why you don't participate in the program.
Correct.
And so I want to spend today's program talking about two areas, maybe a little bit on a third. But I want to talk about how the adjustments that we made in our election process to be able to function during the course of the pandemic in 2020 set in motion people's sort of changes in the way that they vote, the way that they participate in the electoral process, that has changed in a way that has become fundamental. It looks like, looking at the voting patterns today, that people are trying to vote the same way they were voting in 2020, even though certain parties of people in this country tried to claim that that was illegal, that they were stealing votes, and the votes came in after midnight on election day, and that was proof that they had stolen votes. That's the hustle that was being run on people.
The hustle.
And if you didn't really understand what was going on, it almost made sense. You'd see 60% of the vote comes in for Donald Trump, and 44% or 41% comes in, for Joe Biden on election day,
Right.
November 3rd of 2020. And you say, gosh, Trump won. And then you wake up in the morning, 6
Right.
o'clock in the
Whole
morning, 7
different
o'clock in the
story.
morning, they say, oh, by the way, Trump didn't win.
By the way, those ballot votes came in, those other later
all
votes
those votes, they all got counted.
Right.
You see, because it used to be, before the Republicans got into the mindset that they're in right now, it used to be that the election depended on you counting every single vote that was cast, even a vote that had wrinkles on it, a vote where somebody wrote poorly, a vote where somebody smudged instead of, filling in, the lead pencil mark, inside of a circle. They had some of the lead pencil going a little bit outside of the circle. They still struggle to count every single one of those votes. The Republicans appear to feel that, well, no, we shouldn't be doing that. If you couldn't get here by 9 o'clock, on election day,
Right.
you lost your right to vote, right?
Correct.
And you had to come in person, right? Or you lost your right to vote.
Right.
That seems to be the struggle, that's going on right now. So I went to an article written in the New York Times called "Voters Stick to Pandemic Era Habits as Early Turnout Surges." Turnout surges, and what it's speaking to is that we have almost as many people who have started voting through early voting,
Correct,
this year as we had in 2020,
and
a presidential year.
And Mr. Hare, that makes sense to me, because even when I vote now, because of the pandemic, I did early voting. I now want to participate in the early voting because it's less lines, it's quicker, it's faster, it's easier, and most of us want to go the easy way, and that's why we get ballots and early voting.
Now, does your early voting participation mean that gives you enough time to come back and vote a second time or a third time?
No, just one.
Vote 8 times.
I just want to vote one time.
You started voting already, and you got 4 or 5 weeks to go before the end of the election. You got a chance to vote like several times, right?
But I figure that once I vote, well, that too. Oh, is that what they're thinking?
That's the hustle.
That's the hustle.
That's the hustle. See, what they do is they impugn the implications of something that has not occurred.
Right.
But the implication is still a real implication. I mean, the implication is that there's more room for people to be able to engage in misconduct. If you vote in these different ways,
right?
There's opportunities that you could engage in misconduct. It doesn't mean that your misconduct is going to work. It just means there's an opportunity for you to engage in it. So they take the real fact that there's a possibility that somebody could manipulate or try to use the time they have to vote to do illegal things, and they say, see, that's proof that the illegal things occurred because they potentially could occur.
Right. It's their warped thinking that they figure. Most of us, we do early voting so we can do it one time and that's it. Most people are like that.
And the systems that we use for voting are very difficult systems for you to manipulate. So, for example, you vote in Erie County. You vote in Buffalo and Erie County.
Right.
The machine that you vote on, let's say you're on Donaldson Road, near Humboldt, where that school is over there.
Okay.
So you got 3 or 4 polling places that are housed in that one building, where the poll workers from 3 different or 4 different districts, they actually are physically at that school building. And so you may have a situation where you have a person that comes in and they want to cast their vote, and they had already submitted a mail-in ballot, right? The systems that they use catch that.
Right.
If you submitted a mail-in ballot, even if they didn't catch it that moment, because they compare the mail-in ballots to the walk-in ballots, if you're a walk-in and you walked in after having cast a mail-in ballot, they cancel your mail-in ballot automatically, and whatever you did when you walked in,
Right.
that's your vote.
Well, that lets me think that maybe some of the other party, maybe they've done that. And probably,
Of course, whenever these people come up with these crimes, come on now, crime is not invented by honest people. Crime is invented by dishonest people.
Right, right.
So the reason why they're bringing all of this stuff up is
Because they've
because
done it.
that's what they do.
Wow.
That's their game plan, right?
Wow.
And then they blame you for what they do to keep you focused on defending yourself,
Right.
rather than looking at them and saying that these are the people that actually come up with these schemes in the first place, right?
Right.
So the ideation here, when you look at the early voting so far, the country has seen a surge of voters who are casting ballots at in-person polling places. I just wanted to mention again, when I started on a thought and I lost it. The computers that your votes are counted in at your polling place, they're not on the internet. They're standalone computers that just work at that site.
Right.
You can't transport or whatever, the information to another computer, and nobody else can talk to your computers.
Right.
They're a sheltered, system, right? A siloed system. So the things that people were saying that you had some kind of hustle with some Venezuelan somebody. I mean, I don't want to impugn Venezuela. I don't know what their technology is, but they were trying to act as if Venezuela had come up with some scheme that you would cast your vote and the Venezuelans would see your vote and they would switch, your vote from whoever you voted for to somebody else.
Wow.
I mean, that just can't happen because there's no system for that to occur. Those machines are not on the internet in the first place. All of these machines are in closed silos, so that the only people who could actually access the vote are the people in that polling place, in that election district.
Right.
Now, if they're the ones who are doing the manipulation, that would be a bad thing, but more than likely you would catch them. If you saw a lot of mistakes happening in one polling place, you'd start paying attention to what was going on in that polling place. You'd find out they were doing some cheating and you do something about it, right? So our systems are very, very secure. They did an analysis of 10 years of voting that we're talking about billions of votes now, right? And they found less than 300 incidences of in-person voter fraud. And that's just accusations. That's not the counting the number of people that actually got convicted. The people that got convicted were probably less than 75, 80 people that got convicted of it. So this is something that very rarely occurs. Yet you have all of these people, particularly Republicans, who are saying, well, I just feel like, the election was stolen. Well, what's your feeling based on? Well, Donald Trump told me. That's your feeling? Donald Trump told you? Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you a paycheck. And I want you to go cash that paycheck on the basis that Donald Trump told you. Right? So through the first 5 days of early voting in Georgia, for example, in-person turnout is up 70%. That's people coming in for early voting, is up 70% compared to the turnout in the 2018 midterm elections.
And it makes sense.
Right. So you're comparing midterms to midterms. But the reality is those votes are up when you go looking at the last presidential race in 2020. It's very close to the presidential year. In North Carolina, absentee ballot requests are up 114% compared to the requests in 2018. In Florida, the total early vote count is up 50% compared to 2018.
Right.
So if you're comparing midterms to midterms, the voting activity, the surge in voting, is much stronger now than it was in 2018.
Right.
The question is, who is it that's making up this early surge in voting? Because you don't know, right?
We don't know if it's you
don't count the votes until after the polls close on election day.
If it's the Republicans. Well, I do know for a lot of people that Democrats that I've saw on long lines, they know now that the early voting turnout is a better experience. Let me just say that.
It's not only a better, when I went to vote in the last presidential election, right? And I complained about this bitterly. I stood in line for 3 hours.
Right.
Now I live in Amherst, right?
Right.
I'm at a place where you thought is a a local polling place, one or two polling places inside this site. Well, they had like 14 polling places that were inside this site on the Autobahn, which obviously creates a lot more people going to one spot. They reduced the number of polling places. They claim they did that to reduce expenses, and that may have been, their objective. But the result of that was you had to have all of these people had to come to a single place to vote, and so if you didn't have a car or you didn't have the time for you to sit in line. Right. And remember, I've been a chief executive for 50 years, so I'm accustomed to having freedom over my time. Right. But if you're somebody who's a production worker, you're working on a shift, you can't take 8 hours to stand in line to vote, right? You lose your job, if you were doing that. So it seems to me that they knew that. Right. That's not an invisible, undiscoverable, unlikely thing to occur. Right. That's a discoverable, likely thing to occur. Right. That if you reduce the number of places that people can go to cast their vote, you're going to increase the amount of traffic at the places where the votes are actually being cast, and you're going to keep people who are some distance away from that polling place. You're going to keep some of those people from being able to go vote at all, because they don't have transportation. They got kids, the dog is cutting up, whatever it is that keeps people from voting. It's concentrated, when this occurs. So the election experts say that the signs suggest overall turnout will be strong for this election, which you would suspect that it would be. The question is, strong for who? What are they reacting to? When I hear people talk about, and this is a side issue, but when I hear people talk about the election and talking about abortion rights, notice when they talk about abortion rights, I think this is a weakness in the way that Democrats talk about things. They try to find the most mealy mouth, safest way to talk about something, so they don't have to take a bold statement, and embrace the bold statement. And if you like the bold statement, you're with it. If you don't like the bold statement, you just won't be with it. You'll vote for somebody else. Right. But you got to man up, or you got to woman up, for something, right? So what I mean by that is, they always talk about abortion rights in terms of, well, what about the person who's 10 years old that got raped? What about the person, who their uncle, seduced them into having sex with them? What about the person, that their child is going to be deformed? What about the person? I mean, they come up with all of these sort of exceptions or sort of reasons why people would want to abort their child outside of the real reason. The real reason is, or I shouldn't say the real reason, the fundamental issue here is not what your reason is for why you choose to have an abortion. The issue is, do you have the right to make that decision of what to do with your body? Do you have the right to decide that you don't want your body to be expended on behalf of another person, even if it's another person who's an unborn person? Right. That's the issue. It's your right to govern your body. Why not just say that up front and make that the issue? Because then it becomes a civil rights issue. If you think about it, you got the Civil Rights Act, of 1964. The women's rights are part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So having this Roe versus Wade a decision that said that women have the right to control their bodies, that concretized in a Supreme Court decision that women have that right. It's not just a privacy right. It's their body. You have the same right to control your body that a man has to control his body, period. Now, if you believe that, then you would vote to support the Roe versus Wade, and you would be against, the Dobbs decision that reversed the a right to be able to control your body. But they got to talk about it in straight words. We wind it with people talking gobbledygook, like it's only the exception that you're trying to to prevent. I'm not in the abortion question at all, so it's not my issue. But if it is your issue, Your issue isn't about whether or not somebody is going to have a 14-foot head if they get born, and that's why they got to be aborted. That's not the issue. The issue is that you have made a decision that this is something that's not going to work for you. It will not allow you to be able to live your life the way you need to live your life. And so you've made a decision that you're not going to allow your body to be used this way. Period. That's your decision. You
Right.
get to make. I don't get a chance to make that decision.
Right.
You get to make that decision.
Right.
It's your body, not my body. Right.
We got a Facebook viewer that says it's only democracy if all eligible are allowed to vote. Universal voting for all.
Exactly. And let me just take that caller's point one step further. In some countries, not only do they make you a registered voter the day you turn 18, so they hunt you down.
Wow.
You turn 18, they find your social security number. Where's the last place that you were a resident? They send something to that place, a card or something that says, are you still you? Do you still live at this address? You say yes. You become registered voter, right? A registered voter right then and there. They send you a voter registration card.
Almost like military.
Almost like military. And they go even further. They actually require, some countries actually require you to vote. So if you don't show up within a certain number of hours, from when polling, starts taking place, if you don't show up within a certain time period, they send people after you.
Wow.
They actually, they cite you. There's a citation that you get for not voting. You could get fined. They might fine you for like $500 or something like that for not voting. They want you to vote.
Oh, it's almost like jury duty.
Exactly.
Like jury duty.
Exactly. But it's a democracy, right? And if you want everybody to vote in a democracy, then you put all your muscles into making people vote. You don't put your muscles into finding ways for people not to vote. You put your muscles into finding ways for people to vote.
Upside down.
Clearly, that's not the agenda for a certain set of people that are in power in places in this country. One significant shift in how American elections are conducted has become clear. Election day has become and will most likely always be election month rather than election day.
Right.
Because those innovations that came in 2020, people still want those things.
Oh yeah.
So now the people who are benefiting, it may not be, well, I don't even want to stereotype people, but whoever you think the stereotypical, voter is that doesn't vote for somebody like you, or the stereotypical voter who does vote for somebody like you, whatever those stereotypes are, who is it that's actually showing up early?
Well, we're going to find out this.
Yeah, but by the time we find out, it'll be too late. They will have already voted.
Well, hopefully, I'm hoping my people.
And so polling, you can't trust the polling because the polling is based on historical norms that don't exist anymore. If you're looking at polls that took place in 1950 and 1960, well, probably 60% of African people couldn't vote in those polls at all. They would never even, poll you.
Right.
And even if you tried to vote, 60% of you wouldn't be able to vote in the first place because they would have found a way to prevent you from being able to vote. So you can't judge based on historical patterns what's going on right now. You're kind of playing this by ear, as it goes along. Nationally, 5.5 million voters have cast ballots as of Thursday last week.
That's pretty good, right, Mr. Hare?
That's humongous. That's a 51% increase in the number of voters that have early voted. For
I guess we just hope that it's even, that it's half Republican, half Democrat.
That's not what I'm hoping. That's not what I'm hoping.
I know
I'm hoping that it's 93% Democrats, four Republicans, half of whose votes don't count because they were cheating in the first place.
Yeah, but let's be real. That they're coming out this time. They coming out and droves this time, and you know that.
I always drift on my issues and whatnot. You got to forgive me. It's just the things cross my mind.
Right.
When they tell you that the pandemic, is the reason why they made these innovations in the electoral process.
Right.
They act as if that's a real statement, that's the truth. But that's not the truth. The truth is they have been preventing people from voting en masse for decades. They have deliberately tried to keep people from voting en masse. And so the turnout that we got in 2020 was an exception to the rule. They're acting like this is magic because 67% of the people turned out to vote. If you were in Denmark, 89% of the people vote in Denmark. Even in South Africa, you know, more than 70% of the people vote in South Africa. You're telling me because you got 67% of the, you know, the people that voted, this is the greatest thing since the Hindu gym shoes. Right. Well, I'm telling you, the Hindu gym shoes might not be that cool. We need some other kind of sneakers. You know, sneakers that are a little more effective than 67%. Right. But that's the reality. The COVID-19 issue, if that's the issue, why aren't people as animated today about keeping away from each other as they were in 2020? That's correct. When they were getting 35,000 to 40,000 new infections a day, Donald Trump and his cohorts decided policy-wise, we will shut down the economy of the country and minimize the amount of person-to-person contact people are having with each other and slow down this infection. Guess how many people got infected on September 8th? The last time I looked at this is September 8th of this year. Guess how many people got infected on that day? How many? 75,000 people. Wow. Twice as many people got infected on September 8th of this year than got infected on the worst days in 2020. You're kidding me. And yet you don't hear a word in the newspapers. Not one single word do you hear about this pandemic. Somebody is hustling us. I mean, is it just me? I know you all think because I come from a colonial community that I just have a biased view of the world. Well, but that's not true. But, I read, right. I study, and the reality is that we are not being motivated by the things they say we're being motivated by. They're giving us a script, and then they're getting us to react to the scripts that they're giving us rather than reacting to what is true. There were people that said this was a hoax. They did say this is not true. They just no, it's not that the pandemic was real. That was real, right? We know. I'm one of the people that got victimized by that. Okay? I'm telling you, it was real. Most of us did. So that's not the issue. But what you're saying is more people today got infected than back when it was supposed to have been bad. Exactly. And what I'm saying is all those innovations, drop boxes everywhere, early voting, mail-in ballots, you know, making sure you had polling places in neighborhoods all over the place rather than having, you know, 8 different, you know, election districts voting in the same place. Rather than having that, those innovations have been available all the time. Right. They've always had the ability to do these innovations. Why have these innovations not been done before? Something is wrong with the way that we're thinking, the way that people are conditioning the way that we're thinking. We act as if this is some sort of a privilege that was being given to people just because of the pandemic. That's why we're allowing you to vote. No, you should be able to vote because this is a democracy and we're doing everything in our power to ensure that you do vote. Not just that you have the access to vote, we need to be making sure that you actually do vote, right? That should be the driving, you know, schema of how we do things in this country. I know we've got a couple of minutes left and I start running my mouth on stuff and I lose track of things, but voters are requesting just a fewer absentee ballots than they did in 2020. The requests are still significantly above the 2018 midterm levels. The increase in absentee and mail voting could lead to a replay of 2020. Now, the replay that I'm talking about is the issue in which you had maybe 40% of the ballots came in as absentee ballots, or they were counted after the regular polling closed on November 3rd, Election Day. What they're saying is that this created something called the red mirage. The 60% of the vote that came in before the polls closed was tilted towards the Republicans, mostly because the Republicans and Donald Trump started making people think that it was more patriotic for you to come and vote on Election Day than it was for you to vote by mail or walk-in early voting prior to Election Day. And so it gave the impression that a lot of Republicans were winning their races on, say, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night on November 3rd. It gave the impression that the Republicans were winning these races. And then when they got to count a lot of those votes by 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning the next day, it turned out that Democrats that won these elections. They called that the red mirage. You know, it gave this sort of image that the Republicans were winning when in fact they weren't winning. The question is that going to be the case right now? Is it more Democrats who are voting early right now, or is it more Republicans who are voting early right now? We know the Republicans are doing everything in their power to shrink or suppress the vote of Black and brown people, or people that they think won't vote their way.
I think you answered the Facebook question, was how does voter suppression play into this process? And I think
that's exactly what's occurring. So listen, you got that little silent, half silent music on. So I think that's my cue, right? So listen, folks, don't go away. Hopefully we're making some kind of sense. You look forward to talking on the other side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM, WBNY.
What if one day you went to your secret hiding place, and instead of what you came for, you found a phone number, 1-800-662-HELP? What would you do? Would you stop and give it some thought? Before drugs take their toll on you and your family, know that there is help. You can quit. For help with drug use, call 1-800-662-HELP for free and confidential information and treatment referral, or go to samhsa.gov/knowtherisks.
To join Mr. Hare on today's Living for the People, dial 878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. Or go to facebook.com/91.3 WBNY and comment there. That's facebook.com/91.3 WBNY.
There are right now.
All right, welcome back to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here. Welcome you back to our broadcast. Focus on providing insight into the shaping our national regional world and the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. So we're really trying to get into some of the detail of what's going on in the races that are actually underway. Let's not miss that. But we have an opportunity. We have a actual walk-in caller. We take it all the way to the bridge. Okay, we don't just do it, through the internet. We don't just do it by telephone. Sometimes people walk into the studio. So you got a question? Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Hare.
Good morning.
My name's Norman McCarter, and I was just sitting here listening to the very informative broadcast that you guys are doing. And I'm not really very politically, inclined. Don't know a lot about it, so I just have a couple questions.
Sure.
The first one is all of these new innovations and everything that we have going with the early voting, the more voting boxes and the mail-in ballots.
Right.
Has that drastically changed the way that things are now, and has it evened the process, or closed the gap in any way to the point where we are represented better through the voting process?
Well, it did work out that way in 2020 because we had, like I said, a 67% turnout, which was the highest turnout that we had had for over 100 years in an election. We had a much more representative democracy. And so we had a wider spectrum of people whose elections represented a wider spectrum of our thought, as a community of people. What has happened since then is we have, I don't want to blame a particular party. I'm just going to say we have certain people who are in political positions that have been using their control over the electoral process to increase their control over the electoral process, so they could do things that before could not be done. Right. So for example, in Georgia, they actually passed a law that says that if the Secretary of State of Georgia feels that the election was corrupt. Now, he didn't have to have proof that the election was corrupt. He just has to feel that the election was corrupt. And then he can decide not to certify the electoral votes that are counted by each county. Each county has a board of elections. He could choose not to accept those tallies, and then say, we're going to go to our state legislatures. We're going to go to the state assembly and the state senate and let them vote in place of the people. That's actually law right now. There are 4 or 5 other states that have been trying to pass that kind of a law. I'm not sure if they've been successful yet in getting that done. My point in saying this is that even though the pandemic set in motion energy to amend our electoral process so we can make it a more an easier to use electoral process to make more people able to vote, in our country. Even though that was what was done in 2020, there's a lot of people who didn't like that. Donald Trump says that mail-in voting, was virtually illegal because there was so many opportunities for people to engage in misconduct. There really aren't those opportunities to engage in misconduct. He's just making that stuff up, but he got a whole lot of his fan base to believe it. Right. And so as a consequence, we had a lot of dissonance over this. So they've changed electoral processes. The way, when I talk about them suppressing the vote, take a state like Louisiana. They had in 2016, they had something in the area of 720, 730 polling places in the state of Louisiana. They shrunk them down for 2020 to around 30 polling places. So now you got, just think about what the distance is between people when you got 730 places to poll, as opposed to what the distances are if you only got 30 places for people to poll. Right. So that was people, it's not saying that what they did was illegal, but they were using their control over creating the rules that govern an election in a way that biased the election towards those people that had cars, those people that had enough time, in their day to be bothered with doing all of this stuff, So there's an anti-democracy, spirit that exists in a certain set of people in this country. And for some reason, the media doesn't want to talk about it that way. I mean, they talk about the fringes of what's going on, but they don't talk about the fundamental. The fundamental is you have people here that absolutely do not like democracy. They want to just say, whoever we say is the elected person, that's the person. We don't care what you say.
Because you're stupid.
We say, right. Or whatever your reasons are that you don't like. I just don't like you because, you come from a different colony than I come from. Whatever the reasons are is not the point. You do things to inaugurate young people into the voting process.
Right.
The fact that that does not get done, that should not be silent in your head.
Right.
Your mind should be saying, why isn't that being done? Why aren't they always doing that?
Right.
Right.
The-
See,
the
but the reason why they're not doing it is because they don't want you to vote.
Right. The infrastructure was set up, like you just said, before pandemic, was to make it a bad experience. 'Cause
Right.
in the past, it was a bad experience for me, standing on long lines in the cold, thirsty, hungry.
I'm telling you, you know, what Willie is saying is so true. I stood in the Audubon line for a little bit over 3 hours in the cold, in the misty rain. Luckily for me, some nice lady came by. She had some potato chips.
Nice.
She had some water. Then they passed a law in a lot of
You
states that
can't-
said it's
you can't-
illegal to somebody give me some chips and some water.
Which is crazy.
I got to stand in line for over 3 hours and you can't even give me
Crazy.
free chips and free water. The lady didn't have on any sign. There's nothing that said that I'm for this candidate or anything like that. She just had on a sweater and a bonnet, and she gave me some water and some chips. It's that kind of stuff, you know, that we see going on, you know, today. So those are great questions, because that's really the kind of stuff that should be in the minds of all of us. I would go so far as to say that even if I like your policies, if you are a person who would actually suppress the vote, you would do things to make it harder for people to vote, I would vote against you even if I liked your policies, because I don't like you trying to keep people from being able to vote. Just like I can't even imagine somebody having a conversation with me about, you know, somebody else gets to decide what to do with my body. I just can't even imagine that conversation. What are you talking about? Right. In fact, you couldn't say that to me. We would go to war. I mean, we would fight over that. For you to say that a woman, just because she's a woman, she doesn't have the right to control her body.
That's right.
Purely on the basis that she's a woman, I don't understand how does that conversation even stand? Who on earth is having that conversation? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that is going on. That is what is occurring, you know, right now. And people are making fundamental decisions. I have to drift a little bit. Right now, we're having this conversation about the economy. And they keep telling you, all of them, the MSNBCs, you know, the CNBCs, you know, all of the various so-called progressive, balance, you know, truth-telling, you know, stations and whatnot, are all saying the same thing, that the economy is in big trouble. Why is the economy in trouble? They're saying because of inflation. So let's think about what drives inflation. When you have a lot more money in people's hands and fewer products available for people to buy, but there are products that people want and they got the money to pay for it, that causes the price of those products to go up.
Yeah.
Because in the system of economy that we have in this country, you control demand with price. If people are making big demands on you to produce something and you can't produce all of it, what you do is you just increase the price, so the people who can't afford to pay the price, they stop making the demand.
Right.
So I don't buy Michael Jordan, you know, $300 shoes. Why? Because my brain does not understand why I would spend $300 on a pair of shoes.
Mine's either.
Okay. So once you got to $300, you lost me. Right? Well, actually, when you got to $60, you lost me. I'm no longer a customer for you. Right. But that's the way the system works, you know, in this country. And so, well, what we found is that when the pandemic recession occurred in April, May, June, July, early August of 2020, something like 43 million people lost their jobs. Something like 43 million people applied for unemployment. So we know they lost their jobs because they applied for unemployment. So as a consequence of that, you had the money that those people used to earn not available to them anymore. Now they're getting unemployment benefits. Luckily, you know, the Trump administration did that deal where they gave people enhanced unemployment, so that kept people's, you know, cash flow intact. But that only lasted for about a year. So what happened was you had all of this loss of demand because you had loss of money. But now you get to the middle part and end part of 2021 and 2022, most of those 43 million people that lost their jobs have gotten their jobs back, plus the 2 million new people every year that just turn 18 and become a part of the workforce. They also got jobs over that time period. So we had something like $1.25 to $1.5 trillion of income that was now in people's hands that was not in their hands before. So those companies that were making, dyed, frosted eggs and whatever nonsense people buy, and so on, those people were not able to buy. They were able to buy those goods, but they couldn't find the goods because there wasn't enough supply, because those companies had shut down their production to save money during, that recession period. So now, because people are asking for more stuff, but the stuff they're asking for isn't as plentiful as they want it, the price of that stuff goes up, and that's how they regulate demand. But which would you rather have? Lower unemployment or a few percentage points increases in prices? Would you rather have 43 million people unemployed, or would you rather endure 3 or 4% increases in prices every 3 or 4 months? Now, a lot of people would say, well, I'd rather have the 43 million people unemployed because I'm not one of the ones that's going to be unemployed.
Doesn't affect me.
Since I'm getting money, I just want to keep me being able to get what I want, right? I mean, that's the ugly. We don't talk about this, right? But that's the ugly that is underlying the conversation right now. And our media doesn't talk about it like that because it's too stark to talk about it in the terms that I'm talking about. We have a caller hanging on?
Yeah, we got a caller.
Yeah, let me grab that call real quick. Hi, caller, are you there?
Hi, Mr. Hare. How are you?
Hey, James, how you doing? I hope I haven't driven you away with my craziness.
Human nature is disgusting, isn't it?
It sure is. It sure is. And it's consistent. It's consistent. It may be disgusting, but it's consistent.
I have the solution for elections and smoothing out regional conflict.
Mm-hmm.
This will never happen, but we could have a more fair and equitable world if only the only people who can vote in a country's election would be citizens of every other country.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So it'd be kind of like, and for state elections too. So if you're having an election in Texas, everybody outside of Texas gets to vote.
Wow.
If you have an election in New York, everybody outside of New York gets to vote.
See, and then we're going to have, something between the Magna Carta and 1776 revolution will be going on.
Yeah, it would probably be revenge time.
It definitely would be.
kind of like the Simpsons cartoon episode where all the members were wired up during family therapy so they could push buttons to deliver electric shocks to each other during debates.
Wow.
Yeah, it didn't end well
one.
because of human nature. It caused them to sabotage each other. But we should try that and see how it works around the world.
Well, we need to try something, because it does not make sense for us to keep claiming to everybody on earth that we're some sort of exceptional people and that we have this American democracy. It's the greatest thing since Hindu gym shoes. And in fact, we can't do the most basic kinds of things. We can't even get everybody to vote. We treat voting as if it's an exception to the rule rather than it is the norm. It should be that anybody who doesn't vote should be a person non grata in our society. I mean, unless you're hung up, you got pipes coming out of you and so on, you just can't possibly get to a polling place. Everybody should be participating in the electoral process. And the fact that that is not the norm in our country says something about how we behave as a community of people. It doesn't say something bad about democracy, but it says something about us. And we've just gotten so jaded that we think democracy is a tool for us to be able to get what we want. That's how we see democracy. And that dog doesn't hunt very well. Sooner or later, that dog's going to bite you. So, James, you had another thought?
Yeah, that's about it.
All right.
That's about it.
I appreciate you, man. Look forward to talking again on Wednesday. Okay, take care.
All right.
Take care.
Excellent. Excellent.
We got the federal budget deficit you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Before I hit that, let me just quickly say that in Michigan, just to show you again the track of what's going on in this early voting, election officials in Michigan had already almost 1.8 million ballot requests have come in, and 641,000, almost 642,000 of those ballots have been returned to the polling places that they belong to. In 2018, at this date, only 346,000 people voted by mail. So we are almost double. We're like 80% above what the polling was or what the voter participation was in 2018. So it's not the same as, it's a little bit less than the presidential year in 2020, but it's almost double what it was in the last midterm elections in 2018. The question is, who is it that makes up that early voting?
Yeah, that's the question. Yeah.
Right. So on the budget deficit, they keep telling us that, you know, the deficit is a result of Joe Biden's spending. I need for us to understand, when the CARES Act, which was not Biden spending, that was a Trump era pandemic relief program, we still have something like 15% of that money around the country that still hasn't been spent. And that money was authorized in April of 2020. You all might not know this. I know I'm in the 21st century now, but this is actually October of 2022. So in 2.5 years, we still haven't spent 15% of the money that was awarded 2.5 years ago.
Wow.
That can't be the reason for inflation. The American Rescue Plan, another $1.9 trillion that was put out here, you know, to help the economy, helped to bring down unemployment. Unemployment fell from over 6% to 3.5% under Joe Biden's administration. Who does not think that's a good thing? And anybody who doesn't think that's a good thing, we should probably arrest that person and have them charged with mental insanity and whatnot. I mean, how can that not be a good thing? But I want you to hear what people are actually saying. This my point. These responsible people, these Jerome Powells, you know, these Jimmy or not Bill Clinton type people, all these folks that are giving you this hustle about, well, you know, we have to increase interest rates in order to slow down demand, because their thought process is, if you increase interest rates, you raise the price of money, companies will find that they can't afford to pay that much money or that much interest to borrow money, so they don't borrow money. Therefore, they don't increase their production. So therefore, they end up laying off people and making more people unemployed. So essentially what you're saying is, you would rather trade off the issues of people who are unemployed, their fortunes, in order to meet the needs of the general society, having to eat 3, 4, 5, 6% increases in prices. That's what you're saying. That's a policy. You know, I'm not saying I'm not right. I'm saying that's a policy choice. You're making a choice to sacrifice the interest of 10, 15, maybe 30 million Americans working. You would rather make those people unemployed in order for you to lower demand and therefore lower prices for the other 270 million people, you know, in this country. That's the choice that you want to make. I personally would not make that choice. I would rather have us endure inflation and then keep doing things to whittle away at inflation by increasing our production of critical goods and supplies and services.
Right.
That's how I would reduce prices, is by making more supply available. If I make more supply available, prices will come down. That doesn't seem to be the way that we think in this country. And that means Democrats and Republicans don't seem to think that way. I have problems with this, right? I mean, I'm hoping that our audience is having a problem with this. People are seducing us into believing things. Remember Stevie Wonder?
Yeah.
You know, the blind, you know,
Stevie
harmonica
Wonder.
player.
Yes.
Who also plays the piano.
Yes.
Right? Stevie Wonder had a song. I don't know all of the words of the song. I'm not real conversant, you know, in songs, but there was a phrase in one of his songs that said, if you believe on things that you don't understand,
that
Right,
you
it's-
don't understand.
then you suffer.
Then you suffer.
He says superstition is not the way.
In the way.
You need to understand what that, I call him the prophet, right? Because those words
is.
are prophetic words,
Yeah.
right? If you believe on things you don't understand, then you suffer. Superstition is not the way. They're pushing superstitions on us,
Right.
and getting us to believe that in order for us to control inflation, we have to sacrifice 20 or 30 or more million people being able to work.
We call it perpetrating a fraud.
Exactly. I mean, for me, I can't even process how you could make that kind of a choice. How could that even arise in your mind that you would make that choice? There has to be an alternative way for you to deal with this problem.
Right.
Right? Now, the things they say are inflationary, the Inflation Reduction Act. Well, that act was passed, 4 or 5 months ago, right? Joe Biden and what's the guy's name in West Virginia? Joe, is it Manchin? Joe Manchin.
Joe Manchin.
Right? So these guys come together, they work out something with a few of the Republicans, and they pass this Inflation Reduction Act. Now the Republicans are saying that the Inflation Reduction Act is the reason for inflation because you got all of this money, being flooded into the economy. But the truth is, only about 5% of the jobs that were going to get done with the Inflation Reduction Act money, the money for building energy, production facilities, for alternative energy, all of these things, the infrastructure things to fix bridges and roads and things like that.
Right.
I don't know if you all are old enough to remember, it wasn't but 30 or not even 20, but more like 20 years ago, where in Minnesota, a bridge actually fell down with 67 people on the bridge.
Wow.
See, I'm not sure you all are paying attention, right?
No, I
See,
didn't
for
know that.
me, that is extremely alarming.
Wow.
I crossed the Grand Island Bridge, 4 or 5 times in a
Right.
week. I mean, I crossed the Skyway, maybe 7 times,
Right.
back and forth in the
That
course of a
skyway
week.
is scary too.
Exactly,
shaky.
but you don't need to make me more scared. I'm already scared when I'm on the Skyway. Right? Now you got me scared that the bridge is going to actually fall, up underneath me and so on.
Right.
So I want to see money invested in that infrastructure. I want to make sure that the bridges work, that the bays are dredged, that the rivers are cleared. The Mississippi River right now don't even have any water in it. There are places in the Mississippi River where there's no water because of climate change. Weather patterns have changed to a point where water that used to flow into the Mississippi River isn't flowing there anymore. Who can imagine the idea that you could not take a boat from, say, New Orleans all the way to, say, Ohio? You used to be able to do that all the time. Now you can't do it. You only go a certain way. Then you got to get all your stuff off the boat, put it on trucks, take it a certain way, and then put it back on boats and take it the rest of the way and so on. I mean, this is insane, what's going on here. Again, if you believe on things that you don't understand,
that's good.
then you suffer.
You suffer.
Right? We're putting ourselves through drama that we should not have to be putting ourselves into. I know we only got 3 minutes left. I wanted to hit you with, I think I gave you that. This other piece was Virginia directs 60,000 voters to the wrong polling place. This is what happens when you have people that have evil intent and they got control over your election processes. State election officials directed more than 30,000 Northern Virginia voters to the wrong polling place with their mailers. They sent people mailers about where to go to vote, but it was to the wrong polling places. So these people did not get to vote where they were supposed to. Many of them didn't vote at all because the place they went to was closed. It just wasn't there anymore. They said it was an error. They called it oops. It was the oops factor. You know how that oops. When your daughter knocked the that glass chandelier off on the floor because she was hustling, with the broom playing around and whatnot, and she said oops.
Did I do that?
You wasn't feeling oops, on that day, were you? Right? So they acknowledged and they blamed this on a private printing company that produced the notices. Those mistakes were followed with even more error riddled efforts in Southwest Virginia, where an additional 30,000 voters were affected. Earlier this month, the department disclosed that an unspecified technical glitch had left 107,000 voter applications in limbo. They actually had these applications come in and they set them off someplace and forgot about them. It's that sort of stuff that we see going on. Democrats seized on the string of errors to question the competence of the election department under Governor Glenn Youngkin. You know, our favorite governor that was opposed to teaching critical race theory and you know, Mr. Abortion and so on, or anti-abortion. And so he's the one who won elected office last year on promises that he was going to bring election integrity and his executive skills into government. Lost 107,000 votes, misdirected 60,000 other people to the wrong polling places. That's the executive competence that we get with Glenn Youngkin. I'm not saying that that's true of all Republicans, but it's definitely true of Glenn Youngkin. And so we just need to understand what's going on. I think we got the drum roll. So listen, folks, hopefully we're making some kind of sense. It's going to get even more stark as we get closer and closer to Election Day. So please stay tuned. We look forward to talking to you all on Wednesday here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. We'll see you all then.